All right, the Bothell City Council is back from recess, and we're going to start in with AB 17101, adoption of resolution to submit urban emergency medical services levy to qualified voters. And so first, I would like to adjourn the city council. I'm making you nervous, aren't I? I'd like to adjourn the city council meeting and open the EMS board meeting. I don't know if you guys knew that, but we are the EMS board. Okay, so right now we are. We start off with Interim Chief Ropke. You gonna kick us off?
Good evening. You're here tonight as the Urban Emergency Medical Service Board. And before you, you've got the recommendation for the 6-year Snohomish County portion EMS levy. The current levy is 30 cents, and we're proposing to go to 33.5, which is the same as King County is presently. We try to match that. It's a 6-year term. It's an ongoing levy, and it's for your basic life support and your advanced life support for your Snohomish County portion of the city.
Is that it?
Do you have questions?
I do. So is this a replacement levy for an existing levy?
This is a replacement levy for the existing levy.
And it's going to go up 3 cents per thousand?
3.5.
3.5 cents. And it's in Snohomish County only that would be paying, would vote on this levy as well as be paying it, and then King County has its own version of it, but it's an equal amount?
King County is, the King County citizens of Bothell are paying 33.5 right now. So that's why we try to match the King County portion.
Okay. And which ballot will this go out on? Is this the general election?
This will go out on the general election in November.
Okay. All right, that's my questions. Is there any other questions from the EMS board? Councilmember Sandberg?
So in the agenda bill, it says that at this new 33.5 cent per thousand levy rate, the estimated revenue in 2018 from the Snohomish County portion only will be $1.2 million. Is that correct? And then, so I thought, well, what annual revenue has been generated from this levy broken down by Snohomish and King County since 2011? And staff was kind enough to provide the information, but now I guess I'm not so sure I understand the numbers here. So Snohomish, when you look at Snohomish County and King County, roughly, isn't our assessed value between King County and Snohomish County roughly equal? And the numbers are quite a bit different between counties. And then at the bottom, it says parenthetically, Snohomish County includes advanced life support costs, but King County does not include advanced life support costs. So what does that mean?
Well, the basic difference when you look at King County collects the levy. The money doesn't come through the city. It goes directly to King County EMS, and then we get the BLS funding from King County EMS. We do not get the advanced life support funding because our medic service comes from Shoreline. Okay, so Shoreline receives the ALS portion. So for the King County, the city just gets that back. The basic life support money, we get that back from King County in a check, so to speak. Okay? Where the Snohomish County portion, we collect the money. We're able to keep the BLS. The ALS goes directly for our medics that are contracted into the Snohomish County portion.
That's pretty confusing.
Yes, it's in a sense we're matching them dollar for dollar, but the King County portion goes right to King County EMS, and then that's how we get our revenue. In the Snohomish County portion, we collect the revenue, but we pay Shoreline for our medic services. In a nutshell.
Okay. And then, so then I was kind of getting an idea of how much money do we collect from that levy? And then, what is that in relation to our overall personnel costs? And so like in Snohomish County in 2016, we collected about $887,000. And from King County, we collected about $366,000. But our personnel costs are close to $20 million.
And
that right?
That's for 2 years.
For 2 years. Okay, so then 10, roughly
Just
10,
call it 10 a year.
10 a year. And we're collecting a little over $1 million a year for ALS and BLS.
Correct.
And yet most of our service calls are aid calls, right?
Correct.
Wow, it doesn't, okay.
That's why, because the question was asked, does the money go for personnel? Does it go for equipment? And those, if you look at the RCW, the money can be spent on personnel. It can be spent on equipment, supplies, even facilities. But when you look at, and the personnel cost is 80% of our budget. So in essence, that's where all of this money goes, is towards the personnel costs.
It just seems like this levy from Snohomish and King County is kind of like a drop in the bucket to offset the costs of our personnel costs, right?
You're correct.
Okay, then I guess it's a good deal, but for the residents, I guess, in terms of the modest amount that they pay in this levy.
Yes.
Just to add, during the RFA discussion, basically about $3 million in revenue comes in every year that the city collects from doing CRR, from the cooperative agreement with Fire District 10, and from the EMS monies. So if you look at $10 million, our city actually does do some things that reduce some of those costs by going out and looking for partners like with Fire 10 and collecting the EMS dollars and that type of thing. So there is a method to the madness in what we do. Each one of them kind of reduces that cost overall.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
So can I ask, was this levy money included in the 2017-18 biennial budget? Did we make the assumption we would have this money?
Yes, it was, and it was discussed at one point when we talked about property taxes. It was anticipated for 2018, and so there's a 3.5% increase in what we collect for 2018 over 17. Actually 4.5 because of the 1%.
Oh, okay, so 17's under the old and 18's under the,
correct.
Hopefully the new.
The current levy expires at the end of this year.
Okay.
So you're voting on a levy that will start in 2018 for the next 6 years.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Well, just clarify that. The public will vote on the levy, not the council.
Pardon me, the public will vote on the
Thank
levy.
you. Just want to make sure that was
If you
clear.
approve it.
Okay. Councilman Agnew? Go ahead.
Well, to give you a little historical perspective, the EMS levy started in the late 70s. In the 70s, the fire departments were kind of reluctant to get into the EMS field. They felt that their role was in suppression and suppression only. So levy started to help fund the fire departments so they could buy equipment. And that being aid cars and then the bandages and defibrillators. It's escalated throughout. What the chief said was that the voters in Snohomish County are going to pay for their ALS paramedic services. The EMS levy that comes out in King County provides for all ALS units, and there's about 30 of them, and they cost about $1.5 million annually just for personnel costs, not to include equipment. Each agency then gets some funding for purchasing equipment, whatever they want to spend the money on. I think we get, $360,000 annually?
Yes.
So the King County's just brought up theirs to 0.335 to kind of hedge on inflation a little bit, and Snohomish County's in the process of doing the same thing. I think all the fire EMS entities need these funds. They need these funds to survive. Most taxpayers are going to pay less for the fire department protection than they pay for their cell phones annually, so there shouldn't be a huge issue with it. I am in support of it, and I just wanted to give you a little historical perspective on it.
So the EMS board has spoken. Do we have a motion to place the EMS levy on the ballot? Moved by Councilmember Agnew, seconded by Councilmember McNeil to, I like using what you guys say, adopt the proposed resolution placing urban EMS levy on the November 7th, 2017 Snohomish County election for voter approval and authorize the city manager to solicit individuals to serve on committees for and against this levy ballot measure. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councilmember McNeil?
So I just want to clarify, so we're acting as an independent board right now? So are we acting as council members or board members?
We are the EMS board.
Board.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, place your vote. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Spivey and Councilmember Freed absent and excused. Now I need to adjourn the EMS board, and now I'm going to
If you could just refer to them as board members rather than council members, board members. Sorry.
passes unanimously with EMS board members Spivey and Freed absent and excused. Now we will adjourn the emergency EMS board and reconvene as the Bothell City Council. That's always an odd thing that we do every once in a while. We're back as the City Council, and we're on to old business, AB 17-103, downtown parking management. And I believe we have Mr. Boyd here to kick off the discussion.
Thank you and good evening. I have distributed to council and city manager, city attorney, two exhibits that came in just in the last few days. Exhibit 18, an email from Susan Gardner that already went to council, and Exhibit 19, an email from Eric Schaefer of the Hop and Hound that arrived today. So tonight's agenda, we have essentially three items that we wanted to cover, and I've got a brief presentation here. There we go. First, to report back on the Phase 1 parking study that we have been working on with Transpo, and we have Steph Erstein from Transpo here, and she'll go into the parking study and recommendations as part of the presentation. That study leads to some code amendments that will come back to council on July 11th, but we wanted to present those tonight as well. Second, we have a proposal for a Phase 2 parking management study to really continue this work and expand it to help staff develop the full parking management program that's called for in the downtown plan. And then finally, we wanted council to have another chance to discuss parking enforcement options and hopefully direct the city manager to move forward on a more complete proposal for council to consider. Just a little background, this has been going on for some time now, really starting with the some questions came up, I think, as far as back as the 2014 council retreat, but we had our first public meetings and study sessions back in July of 2016 that provided a number of background materials, the excerpts from the downtown plan, the downtown transportation needs analysis, the downtown parking study that was done in 2009. We've looked at other communities' efforts around parking in their downtown areas, Kirkland and Redmond, and then also presented work that we've been doing together with Woodinville and King County Metro and the campus representatives on alternative transportation services. And then finally, the Phase 1 contract with Transpo to focus on the downtown parking issues. We held a public hearing in September 6th when Council did allow limited commissions for parking enforcement. That was the first step towards moving on with the phased parking enforcement option. We discussed allowing temporary parking lots as a primary use, which was denied, but we are bringing that back for reconsideration. And Council passed interim changes to parking requirements pending the Transpo study. And then in January 17th and February, and I see that I've got my unedited version here, we had a study session and a progress report and a discussion at the council retreat. And in those sessions, we also brought further background material, the UW Bothell parking study that Transpo also worked on. So I wanted to, first of all, give kudos. This isn't solely a community development effort. There is a interdepartmental team that's working on downtown parking issues downtown that includes Public Works, police, and the courts. And we've definitely benefited from Transpo's involvement. And I also wanted to say that it's taken us this long to come back to you with a final report. That is no reflection on Transpo. That's a reflection on staff time and being able to juggle this with many other priorities that we've got. So with that, and we have been, staff has been dealing with other emerging parking issues that come up. We've started work on looking at criteria for a residential parking permit program to deal with spillover parking from major institutions, park and ride spillover parking, or just downtown spillover parking into the neighborhoods. And we've been dealing with individual requests for time-limited parking, parking enforcement, et cetera, as we've been moving along. So there's been a lot happening on multiple different fronts. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to staff to go through these next few slides that highlight the parking, the Phase 1 parking study.
Thanks, Dave. So some of this information you've seen before, but just want to take you through the full analysis that was provided. So one of the items that we reviewed as part of this Phase 1 study was the residential parking requirement. Through that, we used King County data from their right-size parking study that they were collecting at 3 sites in Bothell, the Village at Beardsley Crossing, the 104 and 6 Oaks. And then we also supplemented that because we knew there was some parking occurring on streets. So we conducted late night, about 2 a.m. Counts adjacent to the properties on street. And around 6 Oaks, we also counted parking lots that were close by that appeared to have residential parking in them. So that's what's shown here in this first slide. Another part of the study was on-street parking counts in downtown. Based on that study, we reviewed how long vehicles were staying. And you can see that compared to some of the time limits that you have, that folks are staying longer. And some of the unrestricted places, people are staying almost 5 hours. A lot of cases, this indicates that employees may be parking in front of the businesses they work and taking spaces for customers. There is available parking in downtown, but during the peaks it can be full, and we're especially seeing this around 6 Oaks, which is one of the areas that we've heard complaints from. We also did a similar survey on the weekend. The length of stay was a bit less, likely contributed to some of the businesses not being open or not having maybe as many students or park and ride folks parking in the downtown area that could be staying in spaces all day. And there's also more availability. If you look at the green lines on the slides, or the figures C4 and C5, that indicates that that there's more availability on those blocks for people to find spaces. So relative to the off-street parking counts, this summarizes the King County data that we received. And then we also added in the parking counts that we did surrounding those residential developments. We found that for the 104 and 6 Oaks properties, there's a 0.86 vehicles per bedroom. And so that's compared to the current code, which is the 1 stall per unit, or the previous one was 0.75. And then for the village at Beardsley Crossing, which is a little further from downtown, that we found a 1.04 spaces per, or vehicles per bedroom. So a little bit higher than what we're seeing at 6 Oaks and the 104, which are probably a little bit closer to transit. Also, this is new stuff that you haven't seen since we talked last. We've also talked to or looked at Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland codes to see what their requirements are. You'll see that Bellevue and Redmond have a 1 stall per unit minimum, and then up to around 2 stalls. Redmond also has a visitor parking requirement if there's if there's more than 6 units. And then Kirkland has a per bedroom code requirement, which is similar to what we looked at for Bothell. One thing I'll mention for the city of Kirkland is we did talk to the city of Kirkland about their parking code to get an understanding of how that's working. They mentioned that what they actually adopted for their parking code was not what they observed in the field. It's 15% higher than what they have observed when they did their parking counts, and their parking counts were conducted in a similar manner as to how we conducted the ones for Bothell. And what they're finding is that this parking code applies to the whole city, and then their Totem Lake area, which is their growth area right now, it's actually hampering development. Developers are saying that they can't provide this parking and have the costs pencil out. And so they're considering changing the code, or at least allowing for parking modifications. They do allow for parking modifications right now, but the requirement is that you add 15%. So that would get you back to the same thing that they calculated in their original, or that's in their code, since they added 15% to their counts. So they're reconsidering that because of all the issues they're having with development in the Totem Lake area. So for the Bothell, based on the data we collected in Bothell, we came up with kind of a low, medium, and high option. The medium option for parking is based on what we actually observed in the field. With, I would say, a little bit of an adjustment. We observed 0.86, and we recommend 0.9. So it has been increased a little bit. And then we observed for the village at Beardsley Crossing, the 1.04, and we're recommending 1.1. So I'll let Dave go over the proposed amendments.
So the staff report also goes into some analysis of most of the construction that we've had in downtown Bothell. It has been predominantly studios and one-bedroom apartments. So the what we've seen in other cities that have utilized the King County right-size parking calculator is that our previous code, which was based on per bedroom, that there is some benefit in having a per bedroom parking count, but not as a straight multiplier. That 2-bedroom apartments don't generate twice as many cars as 1 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms don't generate 3 times as many cars. So it's more of a gradated scale, similar to what you're seeing in Kirkland, Redmond, and Bellevue. So these next, again, we're not voting on the adoption tonight. This will come back to you for consideration on June 11th. But just to give you a preview and to get any feedback, this is what the code amendments would look like. And I understand this may be a little bit confusing, but if you just focus on the yellow highlighted items, basically we're just amending this bottom left portion of the parking table dealing with residential parking and replacing the 0.75 stalls per bedroom or the interim 1 stall per bedroom with this gradated parking requirement, different levels for 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 or more. The other interim measures that that were adopted would be replaced by this new requirement. And also the previous the council had previously agreed to have limit the minimum at 2.2 spaces per unit, so that there wasn't a disincentive for family-oriented housing in downtown. That's the per unit that we requirement that we use citywide. So that's already there, and it would essentially also be replaced or is incorporated into the new table. So those would all apply to the central downtown districts, the downtown core, downtown neighborhood, and downtown transition districts. Then in the downtown corridor districts, previously council had amended the requirement in the general downtown corridor to 1 space per bedroom. And we have had developers that are looking at sites in the SR 522 corridor district that have said that the 2.2 spaces per bedroom is prohibitive to proceed with development in that district. So we are suggesting having a slightly different parking requirement in those corridor districts. They are not as well served by transit as the central downtown districts, and they also don't have as much opportunity for spillover parking or guest parking on surrounding streets in general. So there, the recommendation, again, based on the utilization numbers that the counts provided, is 1.1 stalls per unit for 1 bedrooms, 1.5 for 2 bedrooms, and 1.8 per unit for 3 or more bedrooms. And remember, these are minimum requirements. And then the other amendment that we'd like to reconsider, the council to reconsider, that we'll bring back on July 11th has to do with the use of lots as a primary use for parking, which we've seen at the old Safeway site. We've seen now at the Bothell Bank site on Main Street. And we're also looking forward to citing park and ride structure and potentially some sort of municipal parking to replace the parking that we'll be losing in this building when the hotels go under construction. So what this does is provides for parking lots and structures as a primary use with conditions that a property owner or a developer who goes through the process of purchasing a property, going through a pre-app conference, and going through the permitting process, can, during that transitional time, can use that property for parking, even if the building is no longer in use. And then we've also added conditions that would address park and ride structures or any sort of municipal parking structure, which says that they would have the same restrictions would apply for any other development in the district they're in. So in the downtown core, those buildings would have to be wrapped on the ground level. There'd have to be pedestrian-oriented uses on the ground level. The parking structure could go on up above. So that's what we're planning to bring back to you for consideration on July 11th, and we'd welcome any input at this point. And then finally, we wanted to talk again about phased parking enforcement. This chart you've seen before. It's very rough numbers showing, comparing what we call a soft enforcement or ambassador model, where the emphasis is on giving warnings and encouraging compliance, comparing that to a hard enforcement model where we aggressively ticket and try to do a cost recovery method. And then also we looked at a kiosk system which would actually institute paid parking. So from past discussions, we've heard, I think, pretty clearly from council that, and we agree that Bothell's not ready for paid parking, paid on-street parking, and if anything, an ambassador model approach would be best. We've also looked at different modes for doing parking enforcement, either an internal program or contract parking, and since we last reported, we have talked to one other private parking consultant that could do this. Earlier on, there was only one consultant that we had identified that would provide that service. The costs are similar, the breakdown is a little bit different, and the cost, when you go to on a monthly cost basis, is fairly similar to what it would cost to do an internal enforcement program. And we provided previously, the police department has provided some budget, again, very rough budget numbers for doing an internal enforcement program. This preliminary proposal would be to hire 2 half-time police service officers to do that, and so it incorporates the cost of training them. And then we've also been working with courts to identify their costs. If we go with a more robust system where we're giving out a lot of new tickets, that's definitely going to have an impact on the courts, and they're going to have to add staffing too. So again, these are all worked out in very rough terms. All we're asking for tonight is some direction to city manager to have staff develop a more detailed phased parking enforcement program. And I will say a little bit about that, the idea would be we'd really focus on the hot spots, the places where the counts indicate that parking utilization is exceeding the time that they're supposed to be. So around 6 Oaks, where we have 2-hour parking, and we're seeing the duration of parking approaching 4 hours, or where we've been getting requests from business owners, as on 183rd Street, where there are no parking restrictions right now, and they're reporting that they're getting park and ride parkers and campus parkers using their parking, with what should be available to their customers all during the day. So those, we would focus on those areas. We've heard pretty strongly from Main Street, and one of the exhibits tonight, Main Street merchants aren't looking for enforcement right now, and the counts show that there's actually pretty good turnover on Main Street. There's pretty good self-compliance there. But the phased parking enforcement program would allow us to focus the enforcement on the areas where we're seeing problems. So next steps, we welcome any questions from council, and if this is old business, but if council wishes to take any public testimony before the July 11th public hearing. And then we'd like to have some discussion and direction to staff on the proposed code amendments, both parking requirements for new development and parking as a primary use with conditions, so that we can make any adjustments necessary before July 11th. And finally, direction to staff on the Phase 2 parking management study to move forward on that, and to move forward on bringing back to you a more developed parking enforcement program. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Just real quick, Dave, I'm sorry if I missed it, but what would the additional Phase 2 parking management study include?
That was in the packet. It would help us move into a fuller parking management program as outlined in the downtown plan. So it would enable us to look at use Transpo's expertise to help us develop the residential permit parking criteria to address spillover parking on the fringes of downtown. It would enable them to do additional counts as necessary to support that. It would enable them to help us start looking at where we might provide parking to replace the 100 spots that we will be losing here in the City Hall building, and how that might be structured. That parking would not just necessarily support downtown businesses, but also the downtown plan has a provision for a fee in lieu of parking that was focused on smaller infill lots where it just isn't feasible to do underground parking. But for that to really work, we need to have some parking for those developers to buy into. So that would serve two purposes and would dovetail with our efforts with Sound Transit to analyze park and ride options along the east-west transit route. Those are just a few of the items that were outlined in the proposal.
Okay. So hopefully each council member, we can touch on each one of these while we talk, or do you guys want to take one at a time when we run through the council? How would you guys like to go? One at a time. All right. Everybody looks excited about that. Okay. So let's start off with the discussion and direction to staff on the proposed code amendments. Who would like to go first? Deputy Mayor.
I'm not sure if I know what this exactly means, but I'm going to hone in on parking requirements for new development. So I'm most interested in the parking counts in Bellevue and Redmond. Oh, sorry, my computer timed out. So I see that in their downtown they have 1 stall per unit and it maxes out at 2. From my perspective, Bothell is not any of these cities, so we don't have the same transit opportunities. And so while I appreciate something to compare to aim for what they have, I think is naive. I'm thinking about what's to come in terms of the SHAG, which in our council packets, we have numbers of 0.67 per unit ratio. That frightens me. And then we have the Junction coming online and the co-op, the Mercantile building coming online, and I assume those are all under the previous requirements of 0.75.
Correct.
So to me, we have a deficit coming, and I can't imagine that we're going to choose the medium density option and exacerbate that deficit. So I'm not in favor of the medium density. I could see potentially, I mean, medium is capping at 1.6. I just can't even wrap my mind around why we would make that recommendation. It's like suicide. So no, I guess I would go for the high. I could see capping out at maybe 2. So maybe some combination between medium and high, but we don't have the transit infrastructure to justify these really low numbers. To say that Six Oaks has 0.86, so we're going to up it to 0.9. The parking counts show over 50 cars are not parking inside Six Oaks, they're parking on the street. So if that's happening at Six Oaks, what's going to happen at the junction, at the Mercantile Building, and all those other the Shag? So that's where I sit in terms of the new parking requirements. What else do you need to know my opinion on?
All right, let's leave it there, then we'll go
Okay.
across to the council on the code amendments.
Okay.
Councilman Agnew.
I totally agree with the deputy mayor. I think that we have a parking shortage. I think that we're going to continue to have that shortage unless we aggressively address it. I think the high option, I think you stated in the packet that with the high option that it'll decrease the amount of residential backfills that we're going to see, and we've had a lot of residents talk to us about that, so I'm definitely in support of the high. I'm not in support of changing the code just for development. I think that's probably where we got into this issue to begin with, so I'd not be in favor of that.
Councilman McNeil.
I would also agree with the deputy mayor and Councilmember Agnew. Rather see it at high than medium. However, I would ask the question, you had mentioned an issue with Totem Lake in the parking requirements, and that it's counterproductive for development. So in that particular case, if it's not cost effective or they can't build because of parking, what would they do?
The city right now said it's hampering development, so no one is, they're just kind of at a standstill on developing there, because the developers would like to pursue a parking modification, but the data doesn't support it because they have to add 15%, which the city's already done. So it's basically just holding up the development in that area until the city kind of reconsiders.
So if we use that same model in downtown Bothell and developers came and said that it's cost prohibitive to build this many stalls per unit, then we would look at potentially reducing the number of stalls required per unit, right? But how does that solve a problem if there's a parking problem? They're going to build the units, people are going to fill the units, and then the parking problem is going to become our problem now versus the developer's problem.
So the medium is based on what the parking is seeing today. So it's accommodating what's on street from the Six Oaks and the 104. So it's what the parking demand is what the medium, it's based on the counts. So it accommodates what's happening today. It would also allow, it could be in the future that with more transit or different travel opportunities, the medium is actually at the high end of what people need, but the medium is what you're seeing today.
Do you ever see a potential where that median could actually go the opposite direction? And as people try to move into 2-3 bedroom units, they now start to have cars because it's more affordable for them to live in a 3-unit apartment with their friends who are just graduated from college and they all 3 have cars. We know they like to Uber, but still. So I'm only asking that question because looking to the future, we don't know how people are going to live.
Correct. That's why we don't, well, this is based on what we have today. the future trends are showing that that people aren't going that way. They're not. Not everybody in the household is owning a car if there's multiple bedrooms. So it's based on the current trends.
Okay, and so I guess my last question would be, how did we get to the 0.75? Was that based on a trend that we saw at that time, or?
The 0.75 was what our transportation consultant, the sub-consultant on the downtown plan, proposed and was adopted. And so this whole effort is to make adjustments to take another look at that. And I think we recognize that the straight per bedroom, there is, I think, some validity in having a different requirement. The requirement be different depending on the number of bedrooms, but having it be a straight multiplier is probably not the right approach based on the utilization studies that have been done. And so we are, all of the median recommendation would generate more parking than the current code does in all of the, in the Six Oaks and the 104 developments. And we can bring back that analysis for you on the 11th. I also wanted to clarify that the 1.6 is not a cap, and we're not proposing anything like, we're not proposing stalls or requirements as low as downtown Bellevue or downtown Redmond. Theirs is 1 stall per unit, regardless of the size, is the minimum, and they don't allow anyone to build more than 2 stalls per unit. Our recommendations are all for minimum parking. The only maximum parking requirement we have is we have a maximum surface parking lot requirement to avoid having large expansions of downtown be devoted to surface parking.
Okay, well, just one more comment, not a question, but the deputy mayor brought up a good point that there's a bunch of new developments coming on. And with those new developments, if you're talking about 1.6 and those are at a 7.5 or 6.7, how many units, I can't remember the exact number, so how many units are we bringing on there? I would be concerned that we're adding that to our deficit, and then we're not able to really make that up if we're not taking anything into consideration above what we would typically need. So I'm looking at it kind of two different ways. You can't really tax the developer for something that they weren't part of to begin with, but at the same time, we're bringing on all these developments and we're going the wrong direction, I guess. Is kind of how I'm looking at it.
Well, one perspective would be that so you have a deficit at Six Oaks. If you're having these new buildings provide more parking, it doesn't mean that they're going to share the parking with Six Oaks. So increasing your parking requirement for the other developments beyond what you're observing, just so you have an excess to serve deficiencies today, you would need to also make it a requirement that they share the parking to serve the deficiencies. Because typically they wouldn't, they would use the parking for themselves unless there was some agreement for sharing parking.
If I can add to that just a little bit, there is, and get back to the 0.67 required for the Boulevard Place, the SHAG project. That is a requirement that's been on our code since we did the specialized senior housing overlay in the 90s. That is specific to those developments that meet those requirements, those restrictions. They came in saying that their utilization is really closer to 0.5 per unit because of the demographics of their population, their tenants. So they anticipate actually having a bit of a surplus. And we'll see how that works with the, because they'll have shared parking with the retail uses as well. But there may actually be an opportunity there to work with them to lease some parking to Six Oaks to help with any deficit that they have. So.
Councilmember Sandberg? Oh, Councilmember Sandberg, would you be willing to do a extending the meeting?
Move to extend to 9:30.
It's moved by Councilmember Sandberg, seconded by Councilmember McNeil to extend till 9:30, the meeting till 9:30. Any discussion on the motion? Go place your vote. Passes 4-1 with Councilmember Agnew in the negative and Councilmember Spivey and Freed absent and excused. Go ahead, Councilmember Sandberg, you have the floor.
Just as a bit of history, the 0.75 parking spaces per unit, per bedroom, was a highly discussed item, and there were some members of council that were concerned that that was a deficient amount of parking, and it has turned out to be that way. But instead of rehashing history, I want to focus on how we can change. And I agree with Deputy Mayor. When I was looking at these numbers, I couldn't believe that our proposal would allow for fewer stalls than Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland, which they're all much better served by transit. So, and I hear where you give this example of Totem Lake developers complaining that if they have to provide more parking, it won't pencil out. That concern just really rings hollow with me, knowing that the owners of Six Oaks sold that property at what some people estimate $20 to $25 million profit. So, and now we're dealing, what I see, the numbers that you've presented in the study, is parking impacts that are largely derived from insufficient parking at Six Oaks, which concerns me as well. We're talking about adopting a parking enforcement program that could cost the city $100,000 a year in staff time and equipment to address what appears to be, according to the data, a deficit at Six Oaks. When I look at the parking ratio requirements, I'm not even sure what's recommended in Table 2 for the high end is a good ratio, because I can appreciate that you rounded up from 0.86 stalls per bedroom because that was what was parked at Six Oaks, but I don't want to use Six Oaks as any basis for parking requirement. When I see Kirkland, throughout the city of Kirkland, they have in Table 1, 1.2 stalls per unit for that studio, 1.3, 1.6, 1.8. I think that is certainly a better approach, because even if we, in our high model, we're only parking at 1.15 stalls per unit, which is still less than Bellevue outside downtown, Redmond outside downtown, and less than Kirkland. So I don't understand why we would go even a lower parking ratio than these other jurisdictions that have far better transit service. I'm also I'm concerned about having two different ratios for the central downtown district and then the general downtown corridor. I think there's a logic in Kirkland to having it be consistent, because when you read the exhibits from the property owners in the general downtown corridor, they don't say the parking requirement doesn't work for me because it doesn't pencil out or whatever. What they say is, if downtown district is getting this parking ratio, we want it too. So there's no logic about what they need and how and what they need to accommodate. It's they're seeing that somebody else is getting a lower parking requirement than they are, and they want the same deal. So if we I think we should look at having a consistent parking ratio throughout the downtown district, just like a model that Kirkland has. So I favor, if we're going to do anything, use Kirkland's parking ratios as a basis. And if we wanted to, we could increase that 3 or more bedrooms up to, 2.2 stalls.
So to follow on that, why are we recommending a lower parking ratio than any Bellevue, Redmond, or Kirkland?
Well, it's actually a higher ratio than downtown Bellevue or downtown Redmond. And
Thank you. I meant outside of the down. Those two downtown cores are serviced by a metro like we will never see in 50 years. So I meant the outside the downtowns.
well, I think there are many areas outside of downtown Bellevue and Redmond that have poorer transit service than our downtown has. And again, our recommendation is based on the utilization numbers that we've compiled. So that's the rationale for that. The low option would essentially be one that is forward-looking, looking at the trend, which is has parking utilization trending downward. So that would again provide or have more parking issues in the short term, but eventually would probably be about right. We think the medium one, based on the utilization we have now, is a solid recommendation, and high is going to essentially be overbuilding parking and adding cost to development and probably dampening to some degree the development that we're seeing and hoping to see continue.
Well, we don't want to see that. But in the Kirkland example, you guys said in the drawn a blank by Evergreen Hospital there, Totem Lake. What's the building height?
I don't know. I don't know. No.
We don't know. Okay, because that usually comes into consideration when you're figuring out parking.
Yeah. I think they allow heights similar to what we're allowing in downtown, but we can certainly look into that.
Yeah, because it gets more expensive if you have, 6 stories and you got to go down 2 stories underground to accommodate parking. You can see how that would be a hindering factor. So, Mr. Boyd, I just want to know more about what you said there, that we would be hindering development if we chose the high option that you've laid out here. I'd like to hear a little more about how you feel that way. And then I also just wanted you to add on, so guest parking is also brought up in a couple of the other examples, and it seems to be not in our parking calculation. So could you talk to that?
Yeah. Since the adoption of the downtown plan, we haven't had a separate guest parking requirement. When we set the minimum, or capped the minimum at 2.2 spaces per unit, which is the citywide standard when you factor in the guest parking. The idea was that we would just factor that into the guest parking into the overall requirement, rather than having a separate guest parking requirement that applies only to certain size projects, as in Redmond or so we could add a guest parking requirement, but we think it's simpler to just come up with a ratio that provides for the units and guest parking.
So it's kind of built in with your recommendation.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little more? I think that's a really important point that you brought up, that you would feel that if we went for the higher ratio, that it would hinder development in our downtown, and that's obviously something that we're not enthusiastic or interested in doing. So could you, what does that look like? I mean, would people just say, oh, I'm not going to buy that property because I can't afford the parking? Or?
Well, we're hearing from developers often that and that's what we've heard in the 522 corridor, is that we've had some pre-app meetings, and they've said that they haven't moved forward because that 2.2 spaces per unit is just too high for it to make the projects pencil out. So, and the Kirkland's experience in Totem Lake is I think indicative of where they added 15% to what their utilization counts showed was needed, it seems to be having that effect there. So I can't say for sure that it would put a damper on development, but I think that is a concern, and that's why we're going with the recommendation that's based on the actual utilization.
And I remember previously in the code that we gave discounts, or if you will, for parking requirements. Were those removed in the last code changes that we did recently, where we took the 0.75 up to 1 parking stall per unit?
No, we didn't remove the ability to do shared parking, or there are 2 ways to reduce parking in downtown. We've kind of built in the transit reductions into the downtown parking requirement, but you can still do a shared parking reduction, and you can do a green building reduction. Transpose report, and I actually made a note to myself that we need to incorporate that into the recommendations for July 11th, is to not automatically give a shared parking reduction up to 10% without a parking study. Any reduction should require a parking study, and not automatically give a reduction just because they meet some green building standard. Adding insulation doesn't necessarily reduce parking demand. So if a project is green by aggressively, giving tenants Metro Orca cards or whatever, then there might be a justification for a parking reduction. But essentially, after the Six Oaks experience, where the developer requested and was given some reductions, and we've seen the impact of that, we haven't been giving any reductions for any downtown projects. But we certainly should look at codifying that, which I'll bring back on July 11th.
Do you know if these other cities that have these higher parking ratios, do they have discounts?
They allow reductions. It's in the report, but only with a parking study, accompanied by a parking study.
Okay.
Now, as Stephanie said, in Kirkland, they still allow that reduction, but they say, and they base their parking count on utilization studies plus 15%. They say, well, you can apply for a parking reduction with a study, but then you have to add 15% on. So they're kind of back to where they were to start with.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess I'm just struggling with how are they getting this parking to happen in Kirkland, outside the downtowns, but in Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland, I mean, development's booming. And so and then we're recommending a lesser amount, and then if we do the high one, that's still even less. But you're saying that would hinder development. So that when you come back in July, I'd like to understand that more, and just especially with the developers that are saying that our parking ratios are hindering development, or those new ones would. I would like to hear from them and understand what they're looking at, because I guess when I look at this, I'm thinking, well, why wouldn't we do the same as like the other council members have said? Why wouldn't we do a similar thing like Kirkland did? But that would definitely be even higher than what you mentioned would kind of throw a wrench in the works on our redevelopment of downtown. So
I have invited developers to participate. I'll redouble those efforts for July 11th.
Yeah, and if they don't need to come either, I mean, just having them send a letter or try to have some explanation to why these parking ratios are too hard to achieve, I'd like to know. And then you guys brought up a good point that I'd like to just echo back. I think it's important to kind of keep in mind that there are a whole bunch of development that are in the pipeline that are vested to a parking ratio that's lower than what we're talking about now, and we're going to have a need for those cars probably to have parking spots. I'm kind of moving on into the next question about should we proceed with phase 2 parking management study. I'll lead it off, and then we'll hand it off so we're all good on. Everybody had a chance to talk about the first part there about the code, and you feel like you have direction from council?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then, so requesting direction to proceed with a phase 2 parking management study. In the back of my head, I keep thinking about the developments that are in the pipeline and what happened with Six Oaks, and what's happened with the 104 and a couple other examples, and the other ones that are coming online with the other ratio. Because of past decisions, we have a situation upon us that we need to grapple with. And what I would like to see, if the council wants to move forward with a phase 2 parking management study, is to figure out, and I hope we can figure out how to do this with transit dollars, specifically sound transit dollars, but to try to figure out and site a parking garage, a public parking garage. And because at this point, and we can overpark the new development, but that's not going to do anything for all these developments that are already being built and are already vested to the old standard. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. And if we aren't at least starting to plan, site, think about, get price points, start talking to the transit authorities that have money to build structured parking, I think we're going to be behind the 8 ball real soon if we don't start working on that. I didn't see that as part of your phase 2 parking management study, but.
I think it was in there. There were a number of items, but.
Okay, is it in there?
Stephanie, you wanna-
It's under the future parking supply. We say that we will work with the city to look at some sites for public parking.
I hope we can expand that to funding sources such as Sound Transit 3, as well as King County Metro and, well, Snohomish County. This isn't even in Snohomish County, but, because the last thing we would need to do is go ask the public to pay for something that we, as a city, didn't have built with development.
Yeah, we can add that.
Who would like to go next with the primary use part? What are you talking about? Oh, for the code amendments? I'm feeling a lot better about the parking as a primary use now that Six Oaks Shag is under development. And nobody else talked to that. So I guess when we go through talking about the parking management study, how you feel about that, go ahead and give your opinion on the parking as a primary use of a site. Would you like to go first, Deputy Mayor?
Parking as a primary use. So explain to me what the conditions are.
First is for surface lots on sites that are awaiting redevelopment, like the old Safeway or the bank here. I know we all get impatient with how long it takes some of these projects to happen, but the fact is that to complete the purchase of a site or to assemble sites to create a development site, that takes time. Our code allows developments to start with a pre-application conference to get initial feedback from the city. Sometimes prospective buyers and developers do that as part of their due diligence, as part of the purchase process. And the code allows a pre-application essentially lasts a year. They can apply for permits within a year after a pre-application conference. Once they apply for permits, that often is a process that takes several months itself. And once they get permits, then again, they have a year to start development, and then there's processes for extending that with cause. So we've put in a 3-year limit for surface parking lots as a primary use to take into consideration the fact that it can take that long to move from purchase to actual construction, and to give property owners that option if they don't have a use in the building to get some or at least try to get some financial gain. I'm not convinced that it makes sense. I think these paid lots are going to sit empty much of the time if there are free options out there, but if a property owner chooses to go that route, that's to give this option, but to limit it so that we don't have permanent paid parking lots in downtown. And then the other conditions have to do with if I don't anticipate any private developer building a standalone parking structure, but if the city finds a way to do that, to fund that, or if if Sound Transit sites a parking structure or potentially multiple parking structures along the transit route, then we wanted to be able to allow that as a primary use and condition it the same way we would condition other parking structures for other developments in those districts. So that was the reason behind that.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would be in favor of parking as a primary use. Regarding the parking management study, I'm torn because I feel almost as though it might be a little premature, because I really think when we're going to need the parking management study is post the junction coming online and the mercantile building and the hotels taking away 100 spots from City Hall, and so in a way I'm torn and wondering if elements of that anyway are a little premature, given what we know is coming. Do you want to speak to that?
So part of the parking study would be to consider what's coming online and what parking they're providing and what deficit they might have. So it would consider what's being developed and even look at parcels that, or what the zoning is for different parcels to figure out what the future parking needs would be for the city.
Okay. I guess the reason I hesitate is because I don't want to sound rude, but some of your numbers really concern me because I don't think they're reality. So then to go ahead and do a parking management study I guess I would question whether or not those were based on what's actually coming, or if we're being a little too optimistic, because we're being compared to Kirkland and Redmond and being suggested that we would actually require less than they do when they have transit and we don't.
So the future parking would be based on, not just based on Kirkland, Redmond, Bellevue. It would be based on what you're experiencing today, what traffic modeling projects, and what industry data there is available for areas like this.
Okay, because I can say when I go to Kirkland, I don't feel like it's easy to park. And yet you're suggesting that actually they're too high. And so that concerns me a little bit. Like, do we have the same goals in terms of available parking?
So for Kirkland, and to note in downtown, they haven't actually tested these rates in downtown. There's been no developments in downtown that have actually had to use this code. This was passed after all the development was approved in downtown.
So what were
so they had a lower parking rate at that time.
So they had a lower and then they raised it. Oh, well, it sounds like we don't want to go down that road of making the same mistake. Oh, but we already did. Can I ask real quick what the parking assessment district is, or is that part of a different discussion? I just noticed it on page 105 of my packet, and I was curious to know a little bit more about that.
It's part of it. Oh, okay. That was one of the items in the parking management study, not the parking management study, parking management, the outline for a parking management program in the downtown plan. And we're not, this phase 2 parking study is not proposing to go into that, but that would be it would be to explore downtown businesses getting together, taxing them kind of like an LID in order to perhaps to build a parking structure. So it might be one funding mechanism that would come out of an analysis of where we could provide that kind of parking. So we might touch on that in that study, but it wasn't a focus of the phase 2 study.
Okay, so it's not a focus. Would this be the correct time to inquire staff's perspective on the email from Susan Gardner? Or is that separate, a separate discussion? I'm not sure how to react to this because I'm not a parking expert.
So that was, I actually got a earlier handout from Susan at a Downtown Action Committee meeting and shared that with Stephanie. And, but we haven't really explored that. I've actually been meaning to get back to Susan to see if she had ideas about where the parking would be that these shuttles would
Shuttle from?
shuttle from. She mentioned the 103rd Street right away south of Main Street, but that's pretty limited. So it wouldn't hurt to look into that, whether that is viable, but we'd have to find a place to put those cars, to shuttle those cars from, or the people from.
Okay, I guess I can give some support toward the parking management study. I have some reservations, but if we're truly looking at the future and what we are going to be grappling with, then it seems wise to move forward.
Councilor Agnew.
Parking as a primary use, I'm good with that. Direction for the Phase 2, I think the Phase 2 is instrumental in trying to do what we're doing. I think it's going to give us the future needs of the parking mess that we have made at this time. I hope some of your demographics come to fruition to where people are going to need less parking stalls. I hope that is the case because we're going to have a lot of businesses here, and maybe they can use some of those parking stalls because businesses have complained for quite a while that they don't have enough parking stalls for their customers. So I think that Phase 2 we need to do. It would have been nice to do the Phase 2 a few years ago before we put in the 6 Oaks and that. And we probably wouldn't be in the position we're in now. Thank you.
Councilmember McNeil.
I am also okay with parking as a primary use. However, I would just have a question. Would that include properties owned by the city as well that have not closed, or would that be they have to close first?
I guess I'd have to think. Technically, these zoning rules apply to the city as well as to private development. So I can't. There hasn't been any discussion of using any of those parcels for parking other than construction-related parking to date. But
So if they were tied up in closing or whatever, they could potentially be used for parking?
I suppose that's a possibility.
Okay, so I'd be in support of that, just would like to have more information on how that could work. The management study, I tend to agree with the mayor on this one, and the deputy mayor and other council members that have spoke before me. I think that gives us that study will give us an opportunity, especially if we include the partners, Sound Transit, Metro, even community transit. I think it gives us an opportunity to see what type of projects we could put together and what's available to us in our downtown core to make up the deficit and the increased deficit that we're probably going to see over the next few years. So I think that's a huge opportunity. I think we should definitely take that opportunity and make sure that that is top of the list in that study of working with other partners.
Councilmember Sandberg.
So I'm in favor of having parking be a primary use. And actually, I'm in favor of not having a 3-year restriction on it, because I think we're a car-loving culture. We all own cars, and yet we don't want to provide for them in development, and we don't want to allow them to park anywhere in a parking lot. And I think if a private property owner wanted to utilize their space as a parking lot, that could go a long way to alleviating some of our parking concerns Because otherwise, if parking isn't provided, if we're not getting enough parking in the developments themselves, which I hope we are remedying by increasing the parking ratio, and we're not allowing any lots to operate as private parking lots, which, by the way, happens all the time in other places in downtown Seattle or wherever, then we're looking then to the city to providing that parking in maybe a garage, which is what I'm hearing. And parking or structured parking, just simple above ground, not even excavating, simple above ground parking stalls are costing $35,000 now per space, which is such a high expense that our transit agencies, which are far deeper pocketed than we are, don't want to build anymore. They want to go away from this idea of structured parking and park and rides. So I'm in favor of allowing parking as a primary use indefinitely, because I think by the time we catch up with transit infrastructure and new technology and Uber and all that, those properties will redevelop in time, and then we won't be having this conversation about inadequate parking, because it will be replaced by some entirely new paradigm. In terms of this study, I think it is premature for the reasons that the deputy mayor said. Yeah, you can try and predict what your available parking supply is to the predicted usage, but if I look at this table on 127, I don't know how you would predict that, for example, in 6 Oaks, you would have a supply of 151 spots, but only a occupancy of 113, with 55 parking on street and 50 located off street in some other location. So the study can predict, but if you don't have actual numbers of those facilities online, I think it's going to predict, if we stay at a current ratio, that there's going to be a deficit. This study also, the cost is roughly $47,000, is again a one-day study for a weekday and a one-day study for a weekend. And I am wondering if we have incorporated any of the solutions that have been proposed to us through the exhibits already. So, for example, the manager at 6 Oaks said that they would be willing to enter into a 30-day contract with Diamond Parking with the city to see if that alleviates parking problems. We've had property owners say we want 2-hour parking. We've had property owners that say we don't want 2-hour parking. What about this possible solution of the quote from page 150, the city and the merchants join together and create a card to go on the windshield to briefly state parking limitations. And there were a lot of solutions that were presented in this exhibit packet. I'm not sure we've even acted on, and now we're talking about studying more in the hypothetical. So I don't support moving forward with the parking demand management study, because I feel like it's not going to give us realistic on-the-ground data. We haven't investigated other solutions. I think we need to be talking about when those 100 spaces are leased to the hotel, and the hotel, that parking is lost for public parking. What steps are we at City Hall going to do to make more parking available just through internal demand management? That 2009 parking study suggested that when that time came to leasing those spaces, that there would be an aggressive employee carpool off-site parking mechanism. So instead of thinking about building new parking garages, why don't we think about how we're going to aggressively provide more public spaces when the hotels come online? And another important thing about public agencies providing parking, the university and the college campuses, they are required by law that their parking be self-sufficient. They do not get any subsidy from the state. So when they finance their parking lots and their structures, they have to be self-sufficient and funded by user fees. So if that public entity has that requirement, why are we talking about subsidizing parking here? So, and there, when my conversations with UW, you know, she went to a conference on parking, and Eugene, Oregon makes money on their parking. So I'd rather spend time looking at those models than time spent on a hypothetical study, because I want to look at those other models. I want to look at internally at our solutions here, and if we have $46,000 to spend, I'd rather spend it on those efforts.
Okay, we got the last item here, direction to staff on parking enforcement options.
Oh, can I interrupt to make a motion to that we extend to 9:45 then?
I'll second that. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, place your vote. Passes 4-1 with Councilmember Agnew in the negative and Councilmember Swaby being freed, absent, and excused. So we've got the last item, which is the enforcement, parking enforcement. And who would like to take the first swipe at given direction? Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Not yet. That's all I have to say about it.
That was easy. So I guess we'll just go down this way. So I've heard a lot from two very specific locations in the city where we're having parking issues. One is at the Beardsley Crossing, which I think is temporary due to construction issues. The other is at the 6 Oaks. And I would like either one of two things to happen. One, we take down the signs that we're not enforcing, or we start enforcing them. And if we need to do that with officers, then do it. But I do feel like we're putting out a false hope or some sort of, like, we're giving misdirection to the public that, hey, we are going to enforce, you put signs up that you're going to enforce a parking requirement and then you don't. I think that doesn't bode well with the public. So I'd like to kind of look at that and try to make a decision as a council. Are we going to, or are we not going to have time limited parking? And if we are not, aka we're not going to enforce it, then I think we need to reconsider all those fancy 2-hour parking signs that we put up. Councilman Reagan.
I'd be in support of phased enforcement. I'd be in support of it being internal also. We have an issue. We have an issue now. We need to address the issue. Being an ambassador and being a nice guy has gotten us to the point we are right now. So that's my 2 cents.
Councilmember McNeil? No, Councilmember Sandberg?
I had the opportunity to talk to one of the business owners over there on 6 Oaks just last week. They like the 2-hour signs. They have the big sandwich board signs that they say cannot be missed. And so they like that. We've had other property owners and business owners request 2-hour limitations in front of their businesses. We've had property owners that say they don't want the 2-hour limitation. I think that we could we could work with the property owners to see what they want, because they know what goes on in front of their businesses on a day-to-day basis versus a one-day count. And like I mentioned, one of the solutions was for merchants to have a card that they put in the windshield. The business owner by Six Oaks said, you know, people, when they know they're breaking the rules, they have a little bit more angst in doing it. And so putting up that sign makes it, increases their angst and dissuades them from breaking the rules. In terms of, are we going to enforce it or not? Did we ever try this 30-day contract with Diamond Parking? Six Oaks said in their exhibit, in their testimony, they are willing to pay for on-street parking enforcement. They just can't do it directly because it's a public right-of-way. So they pay for it inside their facility, but they said if we contracted and billed them, they would pay for it. So have we done that?
We have asked Diamond for estimates for what that would take. We've actually, and they said they balked at that. The ownership balked at that. The property management group would definitely like to do it. Their ownership group has balked. We suggested that they try negotiating directly with Diamond to see if they could get a better deal. And that didn't come to fruition either. We've since got a proposal from another vendor that I haven't had a chance to run by the Six Oaks property managers, but so I think that's still in play, but so far that hasn't been the case. But we'd also be applying the same to some of the projects that are coming online that have, particularly the ones that have taken advantage of the getting credit for on-street parking that they build or pay for toward their commercial parking requirement. That I think there's a real nexus to get them to pay for that.
I guess what I'm saying is that there are options to explore for enforcement that don't amount to, in one instance in the agenda bill, a $9,000 per month budget impact in terms of hiring officers and buying a vehicle. So I want us to explore those first. And when you look at the data, it's this parking problem, it is generated from a few parcels. So we can concentrate on those parcels, and we can give the property owners those 2-hour limit or 3-hour limit signs because they know what their businesses need to accommodate. And then they've provided a lot of solutions, and I think we just need to explore those more.
I would agree that we've gotten a lot of great ideas, and that's really the point of the Phase 2 parking study, to really take those ideas, test them, use the expertise. We do not have that expertise or that time on staff right now, and we can take those ideas, do more outreach to those businesses, and really get ahead of this problem.
All right, so do you got the direction you needed then to come back July 11th? City manager, feeling good?
Yeah.
I do. I think we have the direction. I just, I guess I just want to be sure that there's an understanding that we would never do a parking enforcement program without council permission. That is a policy decision. And so I heard a little bit of consternation that we haven't done anything, there hasn't been action, there's these opportunities out there. And we've been coming back to you for many months now. I was just looking back at the history. We're looking to you. We keep presenting options, and we keep presenting, we know there's a problem, we hear it, we see it, we live it, and we've continued to come back to you with options. And so again, we're back here in front of you saying, we really need that direction, and the council's quite frankly been hesitant to make a decision about enforcement. And I understand that there's potentially some other options out there. So I just want to be sure that that you understand that we're not dragging our feet in this, that we're trying to present options to you that are available. Again, I think as Mr. Boyd says, we don't have the expertise to design parking programs. Parking is a complex issue. That's why this is a whole field of study and analysis. It's something that's very simple in a driver's mind, but it's actually a very, very complicated field to study, to understand, and to make good recommendations for a community to be able to implement. And so that's what we're trying to do, and that's why we're recommending the phase 2 of this study to help us with some of those standard programs and also creative programs, but looking to you to give us the direction so we know what to do next. So I would never implement even a 30-day parking enforcement program without council permission. That is a policy decision. So just a few points to clarify.
So I would say, at least from my experience, that we've had multiple meetings and talked about this. It's always been kind of this flavor of like, well, what do you feel? And we kind of go down, we don't do a formal vote, and I think it's time.
Yes.
I think we need to have something come back that says, you want to do this or not? And we vote on it and go, because we don't have a consensus on this council about how to move forward, but we have to start using the majority rule and trying to move this forward.
Okay, well, we're happy to bring back items for you to make a decision on.
Okay. Councilman Shammer?
I'm in favor of the Six Oaks management provided solution to try a 30-day contract that we administer and they pay for. And if we offer that and they don't want to avail themselves of that, then that's their problem. It's not our problem. That is a solution that they can implement. And so I think we need to pursue those things before we automatically say, okay, well, now we're going to invest in, by any estimates, $50,000 to $100,000 a year parking management program.
Agreed. So when it comes back, let's have decision points and we'll vote on them individually.
Understood.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember McNeil, second by the Deputy Mayor. Go ahead and place your vote.
I agree on this one.
Passes unanimously. We're adjourned.